Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Patriot's History. I'm Larry Swikart, co-author of Patriot's History of the United States, along with Michael Allen, and your host for this reading. We are now up to Chapter 7, Red Foxes and Bear Flags. And we are starting right after the timeline. Now, as you know, every time I read from the 15th anniversary edition, which is now in its, we're now in our 41st printing. And so this is substantially different from some of the earlier editions, particularly if you get before the 10th anniversary edition. But the headers are usually the same. This header, I think, has always stayed the same. And so this header is called Buckskins and Bible Thumpers. The Jacksonian period ranks as one of the great periods in American social reform and cultural change. America's Hudson River School of Artists emerged, as did the distinct and talented regional Northeastern and Southwestern writers. There were transformations of attitudes about social relationships, health, prisons, education, and the status of women and African American slaves. Advocates of communalism, vegetarianism, temperance, prison reform, public schools, feminism, and abolitionism grew into a substantial Jacksonian reform movement. Religious revivals washed over America in 6 great waves, ranging from the Puritan migration and the Great Awakening of the 17th and 18th centuries to the new millennialism of the late 20th century. In between came the age of Jackson's monumental Great Revival, known to scholars as the Second Great Awakening. Throughout the 1815 through 60 period, religious enthusiasm characterized American culture, from the churches of New England to the camp meetings on Western frontiers to the black slave churches of the Old South. Why did this era foster religious fundamentalism? The emergent Industrial Revolution caused huge changes in the lives of Americans, an upheaval that, in part, explains the urgency with which they sought spiritual sustenance. Industry, urbanization, and rapid social shifts combined with the impending crisis over slavery to foment a quest for salvation and perfection. Hundreds of thousands of Americans found answers to their profound spiritual questions in Protestant Christianity. They adopted a democratic brand of religion open to all, featuring a diverse number of Protestant sects. Great Revival Christianity also was enthusiastic. Worshipers sang and shouted to the heavens above. Together, believers sought perfection here on earth. Perfectionism, or a belief that any sinner could be saved by Christ and, upon salvation, should pursue good works to ensure that saving grace shifted the focus from the Puritan emphasis on the afterlife to the possibility of a sin-free world in this life. A few perfectionists were millenarians who believed that Christ's second coming was imminent. The Millerites, that's a capital M named after Miller, the Millerites, named for their leader William Miller, America's most famous millenarians, actually donned white robes and climbed atop barns and rooftops in 1843 to meet Christ as he joined them on earth. He did not appear, as the Millerites had prophesied, a non-event they referred to as the Great Disappointment. Thousands left the faith, although a young woman named Ellen G. Harmon White, herself converted at a Methodist camp meeting and a protege of Miller's, a virtual American Joan of Arc, picked up the standard. She had several visions, and despite her sex and youth, became a de facto leader of a group that, by 1860, had chosen the name Seventh-day Adventists, referring to the impending advent of Christ. The church's membership roll swelled. Espousing a healthy lifestyle and avoidance of certain foods and meat, Adventists produced the cereal empire of John and Will Kellogg and influenced the career of another cereal giant, Charles W. Post. kind of interesting that when we lived in Ohio, my son was ready for school. We wanted to send him to a Christian school, but there were no Christian schools south of town where we live. And we didn't want to drive him all the way into Dayton every day. So we settled on Spring Valley Academy, which was a Seventh-day Adventist school. We were not Seventh-day Adventists, but we got to participate in a lot of their things that they did, band concerts and so forth. And a lot of that required going to church on Saturday because they believed in keeping the Sabbath. And so we got to see a lot of their church services up close and personal. And it was a great little school for Adam because the kids watched out for each other. There was no hate. There was no constant competition. They did kind of wear a uniform. Just all in all, it was missing a lot of the bullying and drug problems that you would see at public schools. So we were happy for that. Mary Baker Eddy, 1821 to 1910, who made her most important mark in American religious history slightly after the Jacksonian era, nevertheless rode the Second Great Awakening revivalist quest, adding to the health food orientation of Ellen White the more radical doctrine of faith healing. Healed of great pain in her youth, Eddy founded the first Church of Christ Scientists, today known as Christian Scientists, in which spiritual healing depended heavily on mind over matter. Like others, she founded a college and an influential newspaper, the Christian Science Monitor, which up until maybe 15, 20 years ago was still one of the leading papers in the country. It was pretty objective and was well read. These new millennial groups differed from the traditional churches, not only in their perfectionist doctrine, but also in their religious practice. In sharp contrast to the prim and proper Puritans of many new sects established an emotionalism characterized by falling, jerking, laughing, and crying, so-called falling out in the Spirit or being filled with the Holy Spirit. And it worked. Where old-line churches like the Presbyterians scoffed at the enthusiasm of camp meetings, which had started as early as 1801 in Cane Ridge in Kentucky, they could not match the attractiveness and energy of the evangelists. The Methodists, whose songs Charles Wesley had adapted from English pub tunes, grew rapidly to become the largest church in the United States by 1844. Like the Baptists, the Methodists believed in revivals, in which the evangelical fires would be fanned periodically by hellfire and brimstone preachers who crossed the countryside. While the sects posed doctrinal challenges for the established denominations, no one could deny that they nevertheless added to the climate of religious excitement, leading to the establishment of theological colleges in nearly every state. Most perfectionists believe that Christ's coming would be preceded by the millennium, Revelation 21 through 3, a 1,000-year period on earth of perfection, peace, prosperity, and Christian morality. These are not people who believe in the rapture or the taking away, the catching up of the church prior to the tribulation. Rather, they believe in what we would call a post-trib rapture. The Second Great Awakening was a time when perfectionists commenced this millennium of peace on earth. Perfectionists preached that although man was sinful, he did not have to be. Individuals possessed the power to save themselves and join together to create a perfect world order. Quote, to the universal reformation of the world, evangelist Charles Grandison Finney exhorted, they stand committed. So you can see that on the one hand, there's a pressure here to bring about the millennium, to act as if he had faith, to walk as though it were already happening. In our modern lingo, if you fake it till you make it. And so Did they deny reality? Yeah, obviously. I mean, some of them, these people went out to the top of the barn or whatnot, obviously denied reality. I remember a cartoon. This was a true story. Here in Arizona, around somewhere between 70, 72, 73, something like that, I think. Could be later. I was in Arizona off and on so often that I can't remember. But there was a sect down in Tucson that literally believed Jesus was coming, and they had the day down. And they had literally sold their possessions and had met on top of a hill out there that was preordained to greet Christ. And he didn't show up. Well, a cartoonist, a secular cartoonist who had a lot of beef with Christians, but he had a pretty funny cartoon. He showed two panels. And in the first panel, this group was all standing there, and the main preacher was looking up like this, and he had a dog in his arms, and everybody else is standing there, and they're all looking up and hands, And in the next panel, the dog was gone, but they were all still there. So, made you kind of think. The Second Great Awakening was thus a radical extension of the religious enthusiasm of the Puritan migration in the First Great Awakening. Down-to-earth Jacksonian preachers and laymen fanned out to convert tens of thousands of sinners and lead them to salvation. Baptists and Methodists, sects less than a century old, figured prominently, but so too did Presbyterians, Congregationalists, and Mormons. The Erie Canal route of upstate New York, a scene of tumultuous economic and social change, became such a hotbed of religious fervor that it was dubbed the burned over district because of the waves of religious fire, hell and brimstone preaching that regularly passed through. Here, a new figure strode onto the scene, Charles Grandison Finney, a law student who simply woke up one morning to a realization that he needed the Lord. Probably the easiest way to do it so you don't have to go through alcohol and drugs and everything else. When he appeared before the bench that day, Finney was asked if he was ready to try the case. He responded, quote, "I have a retainer from the Lord Jesus Christ to plead his cause. I cannot plead yours." Abandoning the passive Puritan view of salvation, one either was or was not saved, Finney initiated an activist evangelical ministry that introduced many new practices that shocked the prim and pious churchgoers of the day. Among Finney's new measures, as he called them, were allowing women to pray in mixed-sex meetings, camp services that ran for several days in a row, and the use of colloquial language by preachers and praying for people by name. In 1827, the Presbyterians called a convention to investigate Finney's methods, but they adjourned without taking any action against the new measures, and Finney's revivals continued. The tall, athletic, spellbinding Presbyterian minister, whose popularity equaled that of Old Hickory himself, called on all Americans to, quote, stand up for Jesus. That was one of our big songs in the Baptist church growing up. And let me just say that we're still, in many ways, wrestling with some of these issues. What is the proper position, with the proper tone, the proper temperament, the proper approach to church? Should it be reverential? Should it be celebratory, as the evangelicals and Pentecostals do? Should it be quiet and deferent? Should it be happy and outgoing? Should it be highly structured like the Catholics and the Presbyterians, to where you have certain prayers that are read in unison? Should it be highly individualistic, even to the point of allowing church members to speak up and pray in tongues during the service? Should it follow exactly what is being handed down from the top, as in the Presbyterian churches, or as in all the congregational churches? Should it respond to what the people want from down below? What about music? There was a longest time when an organ was thought to be an agent of the devil and was not permitted into church services. Then came the guitars. Well, what about an electric guitar? What about drums? What about a band? How loud should the band be? I have a problem with our church, and I'm a rock and roller, folks. You know me. But I've got a problem with our church that our music is simply too loud. When your shirt is going, boom, 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 that's too loud for church, right? I mean, anyway, but that's just my personal view. But all these things are being debated then as they are now. Now, today, obviously, we have some different issues, whether it's with homosexuality or transsexuality or climate change or stuff like that, immigration. But the fundamentals of how you do church are debated no less today than they were then, no more than they are today. It's an ongoing thing. All right, we'll do 3 more paragraphs here. A much more radical group appeared in Palmyra, New York, where Joseph Smith claimed he had been visited by the angel Moroni. The angel showed him golden tablets, which he was allowed to translate through 2 mystical seer stones that broke the language code, dictating what was called the Book of Mormon in 1830. Smith's remarkable book related the history of migration of an ancient tribe of Israel to the New World and the Indian tribes prior to the arrival of Europeans, as well as the New World appearance of Christ. Smith quickly built a loyal following, and a group took the name Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, generally known as Mormons. And we have a lot of Mormons out here. There's a Mormon church probably on every 4th or 5th block. The members who moved to Ohio, where they became entangled in a bank collapse, then to Missouri, where they were ensnared in the slavery debate, taking the anti-slavery side. So not only do they have a different religion, it's important to understand that especially once they get into Missouri, they have inevitably become a part of the slavery debate, and they tend to vote as a single body. So that's a lot of voters to come in if you're on the wrong side of the slavery debate in a pro-slave state like Missouri. Eventually settling in Nauvoo, Illinois, the 2nd largest town in the state, the Mormons posed a threat to the political structure by their policy of voting as a bloc. When the Whig Party in Illinois introduced a new charter, the Mormons supported it, and in 1844, Smith ran for the U.S. presidency as an independent on an abolition platform. At the same time, Smith, according to Revelation, laid down the church doctrine, the practice of polygamy, that is, multiple wives. Clashes with local anti-Mormon groups led to Smith's arrest and then his assassination while he was in a Carthage, Illinois jail in 1844, so the Mormons prepared to move yet again, this time to the far west. Mormonism flourished on the frontiers of Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, but so did other churches. Itinerant Baptist and Methodist preachers answered the call to scout the Ohio, Mississippi valleys in search of sinners, and most found their share. Westerners flocked to camp meetings, staying for as long as a week to hear preachers atop tree stumps deliver round-the-clock sermons. In 1832, English woman Frances Trollope witnessed a rural Indiana revival and recorded this word picture of the scene. This is what she said. The perspiration ran in streams from the face of the preacher as the camp meeting became a scene of Babel. More than 20 men and women were crying out at the highest pitch of their voices and trying apparently to be heard above the others. Every minute the excitement increased. Some wrung their hands and called out for mercy. Some tore their hair. It was a scene of horrible agony and despair. And when it was at its height, one of the preachers came in, raising his voice high above the tumult, entreated the Lord to receive into his fold those who had repented. Groans, ejaculations, broken sobs, frantic motions, and convulsions succeeded. Some fell on their backs with a slow motion and crying out, "Glory, glory, glory." Well, that's her take. Last paragraph. The religious fervor of the Second Great Awakening had not yet subsided even by 1857-58, the eve of the Civil War. That year, city folk thronged to reach out to God. Philadelphians and New Yorkers witnessed a remarkable spectacle as thousands of clerks and businessmen gathered daily for prayer meetings in their city streets. These meetings were purely lay events. No clergy were present. Observers witnessed the remarkable sight of wealthy stockbrokers and messenger boys kneeling and praying side by side. These different religious experiences offered, quote, common people, especially the poor, compelling visions of individual self-respect and collective self-confidence. All right, that's a good place to stop there. I will pick this up on Wednesday. Meanwhile, first I will be on War Room, Steve Bannon's War Room on Christmas Eve. We'll be talking about some Christmas stories. Remember, Patriot's History of Globalism is coming out on February 20th, and I think you can get it now in pre-order. Remember also, if you want to give the Wild World of History VIP or the Wild World of Politics Insider, which includes my new video series on globalism, my series on Winston Churchill, and of course you get access to my Today's News every day. You can give these as gifts. Just email me and tell me who you want me to grant the offer to after you purchase the offer. And remember, I'm trying to turn this into a movie. This would make an awesome movie, just beyond crazy. Wonderful. Help me out. So buy Larry a coffee at the link. I'll provide it here in the comments, as I often do, or it's on either of the pages. Buy me a coffee, buy me 10 in the Christmas spirit. And I'll see you guys back here on Wednesday.